Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Candidates 2024. This is the biggest chess event of the year, and the winner of this event will play for the World Chess Championship later on in 2024. This is round number 6. Going into this round, we have a very close race at the top of the men's and the women's standings. And one player's tournament in particular after today is all but over. Decisive results left and right. Very dramatic day. And once again, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you all very, very much. These recaps have gotten up to 500,000 views. So if you have a friend that played chess over the last few years, send them these videos. I really would appreciate it. Get them to tune in to the biggest chess event of the year outside of the World Chess Championship. And here we go. First game, we are going to kick things off as always we do with Hikaru. Gukesh versus Nakamura. This is a very close matchup. Hikaru yesterday with a very big win with black gets another game with black. Normally you are alternating, but he gets another game with black and he has to play Gukesh. Gukesh is in first place and Gukesh opens with e4. And yesterday Hikaru played e5, but today he plays the Sicilian defense. Hikaru is ready for a fight. He plays the most combative opening with the black pieces because he wants to win. Because Gukesh is in first place. I mean, you gotta love this stuff. Gukesh plays knight f3, and now Hikaru doesn't play knight c6. He doesn't play d6. He doesn't play e6. Doesn't play any of the melee. He plays g6, which is known as the hyper-accelerated dragon. Yes, that is his name. If you want to play the dragon, generally what you do is you play knight f6, knight c3, and then g6. This has been known historically as the dragon variation, but modern day analysis has shown black has certain problems in this opening. Well, black might have some problems in the g6 setup as well, but Hikaru plays this, and he has played this before in major top events, but it is not very popular, and Gukesh plays c3. You'll also notice Gukesh spent about a minute and a half. Like, he could have played d4, but he opts for c3. This seems to be the opening that he would like to play, because he probably prepared c5, g6 on the side of Hikaru. This is much more solid. And also, this might remind you of the Alapin. The Alapin Sicilian with c3. A little bit less boring, not letting Hikaru get the kind of position that he might want. And now Hikaru plays this move d5. And the idea of this is to put the queen into the center, because white has now taken away that square for his knight. Gukesh plays e5. So he says no trade. And actually, Hikaru has had this position October 2023, in a tournament at the Isle of Man against Andrei Yesipenko when he played the move a6. This time Hikaru plays bishop g4, and that gets Gukesh to spend 6 minutes. So by the fourth move of the game, I mean, talk about good preparation. 4 moves is all it took to get Gukesh out of his prep. Now, the thing is, in chess, you can get somebody out of their prep. They still have an hour and 57 minutes to play the best moves. And Gukesh is really, really strong, so he plays bishop to b5, which just so happens to be the best move. Bishop to b5. Hikaru develops the knight. And now Gukesh just plays very, very, very principled. He just takes the knight. He just gets rid of the knight, so he alleviates the pressure on his center, and then he just castles. And what he's expecting here in all likelihood is a move like bishop to g7, at which point he will get a big center. Then he will kick out Hikaru's bishop and be very happy. But Hikaru plays c4, which is a move that has literally never been played. So Hikaru shows up, has a very interesting opening idea, and he surprises Gukesh, who spends another 10 minutes. So by the 8th move of the game, Hikaru is up 20 minutes on the clock with the black pieces. He's playing in a very, very, very provocative way. In fact, after a move like b3, the engine is already saying that black has f6, immediately confronting in the center. If you take like this, black will go here and try to push for e4. This is nuts. I mean, Hikaru is taking monumental risk, and the tournament is not even halfway over. He is playing in a very, very, very aggressive way with black, but Gukesh kind of stops a lot of it. He plays d3, gets his queen out very comfortably, and now the best way for black to play is to take the knight, which Hikaru does. Bishop g7 attacking the pawn, and Gukesh just doesn't create any weaknesses. Rook e1, very solid. Hikaru plays e6 with the intention to play knight to e7, and you will notice Hikaru spent some 20 minutes on the move queen c7. That means that both players are now out of their prep. Gukesh here playing a very, very nice move, understanding that black either has to play f6, probably not right now because that loses everything, or something on this side of the board, and he just plays this accurate move b4. A very nice idea, taking some space, not letting Hikaru mobilize, and despite Hikaru's best efforts, it's going to be a very tall task to win this game, let alone even get a decent position to try to play for a win. Gukesh expanding on the queen side with a move like c4, Hikaru castling, maintaining the tension, and now the only way you're going to battle here is over here, because if you play f6, I take, and that is not where you want to do battle. So Hikaru plays a5, they have a little bit of tension, but very quickly, we have a trade of rooks, Hikaru trades a pawn, and brings out the knight to trade the knights. And essentially, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 1, 2, 3, 4. These pawns cancel out. White has a tiny bit more space, but it's kind of meaningless. And, you know, I gotta tell you, this was a really, really, really good attempt by Hikaru to cause trouble. Like, that is what he tried to do in this game. But Gukesh was up to the task, and he played quite accurately. And even here, it's probably Black who is playing for a win, because Black has 5 pawns on the opposite color complex of his bishop, which is very important in the endgame, because your light squares are under control, and your dark square bishop will target your opponent. In fact, Gukesh has a pretty bad structure, all things considered. Like, the fascinating thing about this endgame is that, like, if you do something like this, you just get a really bad position with White. So you do have to be a little careful, but Gukesh is a very experienced player, and Hikaru might have had a tiny bit of chance, but they just trade all the pieces and they make a draw. But Hikaru did his part. Hikaru, listen, I gotta tell you, Hikaru showed up and he tried to get it really complicated. I mean, you gotta give the man props, but chess is hard. You give a guy 10 minutes like Gukesh to kind of solve the problems of his opening. He doesn't fall into any of the opening traps. Like, he doesn't, you know, he doesn't accidentally mess up his position, get something. No, he played very solidly. He kind of got into a relatively straightforward position. It was tense for a little while, and Gukesh has 4 points out of 6, and Hikaru has 3 points out of 6. They make a draw. Now, one of these two gentlemen is about to really regret qualifying for this tournament. Alireza Firouzja and Vidit Gujarati. Now, some of you have been telling me, and I get these comments a lot during these events, chess.com saves people's names as their last name and then their first name. And I'm just going to put Vidit Gujarati so his name does not cut off. Now, the thing about names, Chinese names, are written the way you and I would say, like, in reverse. So actually, the first name is written first. I don't know about names from Indian chess players, because this is how they're saved by default. Like, if you look at the online databases, it's not Gujarati Vidit, it's Vidit Gujarati. So I would be very curious to know, actually, for those qualified to tell me, as opposed to, you know, standard 12-year-old YouTube comments just writing Levy never fails to do random things. I actually don't know, but this is, I'm not doing that. It is auto-populating like that. So he's Vidit, Gujarati. Both of these guys have had weird events. Alireza has lost a couple of big games. Vidit lost 2 games in a row, blew a completely winning position, but he shows up again and he plays e4. And just like Hikaru, nobody's playing e5, nobody's trying to kill the game. We're trying to have a fight. Knight f3, open Sicilian. Alireza plays d6. Hikaru played g6. We have this, and after 5 moves, we do not have a knight or Sicilian, but we have a classical. This is called the classical Sicilian defense. Very, very popular. Very, very good. And here, the main line is bishop g5. This is known as the Richter-Rauser variation. But instead, we have the second most common move, which is bishop c4. Fine. Completely normal move. Targeting this, putting the bishop back on b3 maybe, and deciding which way we're going to castle. Alireza plays a very provocative move. Plays queen b6. I just realized there's no timestamps. Something went wrong when importing this game. Well, I will tell you what happens on their clock, but every other game has timestamps. The clock did not play a big role in this game. It really didn't. So I will just let you know. Queen b6 targets the knight. The knight goes to b3, and black plays e6. Now, what black likes to do in a classical Sicilian, bishop goes to e7, bishop goes to d7, a6, and black sometimes strikes on the c file. It's very, very provocative. It's kind of like keeping the pawns back for a little bit, and then bah! You know, like you just weave it here, you got a little bit of weaknesses, you know, and then like that's it. That's what we do. Sorry, neighbors. So bishop f4. Now, important, bishop f4 is not the most popular move. It is much more common for white to play other moves, but bishop to f4 induces knight to e5. And after knight to e5, white goes here, and then black frequently will play something like a6, and bishop attacks the queen. And then queen c7, f4, here, take, queen f3. This has been played many, many times. However, after bishop f4, Ali Reza barely spent any time here and played queen undeveloping back to d8. This move has been played like 5 times. This position, knight e5, has been played 800 times. This has been played 5 times. This is Ali Reza's prep. He is taking Vidit away from known territory. Vidit spent quite a lot of time here and just played a regular developing move, queen d2, and then was going to go castle. Ali Reza plays a6 because it's very common in the Sicilian. And now this nice, interesting move, a3. Useful move. It's basically trying to fight for the b4 square. It's kind of like the point. Like if you had castled in b5, bishop d3 has to protect the pawn. Maybe I'm going to go b4. So he says, you know what, a3. And Ali Reza plays b5, and the bishop goes back. And now black has to go knight e5. This is the final moment. You have to go knight e5, you have to go knight c4. Because if you don't, you're losing. Ali Reza loses this game in 11 moves. Why? I don't understand. He can no longer go knight e5. Because knight takes b5 is winning for white. That is the point. You gave white too much development. If you don't develop enough pieces and your opponent does, he has the right of first attack. And knight takes b5 is lethal. Knight takes b5, a takes b5, bishop takes. Not quite, because the bishop blocks. So what you do is you take the knight first, and you're completely winning. Because after this is over. King e7, this is mate. It's just mate. Queen d6, it's just checkmate. Ali Reza Firouzja blunders his move order and is completely lost. Long castles, he goes queen b6, and it goes from bad to worse. Because here he's worse. He's not completely lost, but he's worse. You'll notice the queen went there, and then back. And then now Ali Reza just decides, you know, Ali Reza goes out like Korean Zombie. You watch that fight against Max Holloway? If you don't watch mixed martial arts, you don't know what I'm talking about. He just decided he's just going to go for it. He's going to swing as hard as possible. And if he lands a shot on Vidit, he didn't actually get up and punch him, but he did the equivalent. He takes the pawn on f2. Black has played 13 moves. 1, 2, 3, and 4 have been with the queen. And he has not gotten developed. And Vidit just pops him straight back down the pipe. Just e5. When your opponent's king is on the other side and hasn't castled, you can shred open the position. Ali Reza goes back. You may be wondering why he didn't capture. Because then the queen is basically stuck. The queen has to hang out over here. Let's say it goes to h4. Bishop g5. Let's say the queen comes back. Something like rook f1, knight to e4, and queen to d7. I mean, and you can take on f6. It's just a completely winning attack down the file. e5, knight d7, Vidit takes, and then Vidit bulldozes the queen side. Queen d4, queen a7. What a move! Ali Reza had maybe 1 or 2 chances, but look, watch this beauty. Bishop a7. That is a savage move. Now the bishop is targeted. The king is still in the center. b5 is hanging, and it takes Vidit Gujarati an astounding number of moves in this game. Yes, the rest of this was mostly conversion. He slowly cleans it up. He doesn't get mated. He has a passed pawn. And I don't even remember the game going this long, which is kind of funny. Okay, 40 moves. 40 moves. And the reason it went to the 40th move is because right around here, Vidit had about 19 minutes. So Vidit had 19 minutes to make 19 moves. And we know that he's gotten into time trouble before, but this position was so dominant, and Vidit stayed focused. He was up 2 pawns. Ali Reza did his best, but sometimes the hole is just insurmountable. Like he got to castle, but Vidit stayed cool, calm, and collected, picked up material, and just simplified. And you just can't lose this. Vidit with 3 out of 6. He's now on 50%. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get better than that. I mean, he's tied with Hikaru. He's a point out of first. It's incredible. What a huge win for him. And Ali Reza Firouzja has 1.5 out of 6. Yeah, that's shocking. That is, it's a shock. And there was a chance it happened because in the last candidates, he was in last place for a big chunk of the first half. And he ended up getting 2nd or 3rd to last, and it was very close. But yeah, wild. Nothing was peaceful today on the women's side as well. Yesterday they made 4 draws. Not today. And I will take you through a couple of the games. Leitingjie and Humpy. I'm a little all over the place in this recap. Like, they don't have the points here. Anyway, then we will come back and we will cover Fabiano versus Nepo. That was a fascinating game. And then Prague versus Nijat. Let's all take a little snack break. Hey, we're 16 minutes into this video, roughly. The average watch time of these candidates recaps is almost 20 minutes, which is incredible. Like, the fact that people even have it. So give yourself a pat on the back and make it to nearly the 20-minute mark today. All right? I guess I won't put any ads between minute 15 and minute 20. How about that? We have a little agreement between us. All right, Vaishali versus Caruana Lagno. This one was a Spanish. It was a mainline Spanish. This position has been reached many, many, many times. And the move d5 is important. Black does not move the d-pawn. Black gives the d-pawn right away up on the d5 square. If Black had gone to d6, it was the traditional, but this is known as the Marshall, and it is one of the most complicated and explored openings in chess. And you give up the pawn on e5, but Vaishali doesn't take it. So normally what people do nowadays is they play things like a4, which is called the anti-Marshall. But she plays the Marshall, but she doesn't play the Marshall. She plays the Marshall and then kind of doesn't play the Marshall. Caruana plays bishop to b7, insisting the pawn on e5 is taken for free. Vaishali says no thank you. She's just not taking the pawn. And the reason she's not is because Black is going to get a lot of active counterplay, and it's quite well known that it's scary for White. Now Vaishali plays a5. A nice idea, disconnecting the pawns, disallowing knight a5, disallowing knight b6, and basically just putting Caruana under pressure, who plays king h8 after spending 10 minutes. King h8 gets the king off the diagonal and prepares potential attacking chess. Vaishali plays d4. Both players out of prep. We have takes, takes, we have takes, takes, and that series of exchanges opened up the e-file, left White with an isolated pawn, and gave VIP access to the b4 square, which Black promptly takes over. It's a very tense position. Both sides have their trumps. They have their benefits. c5 is a nice idea from Caruana, and now all the center pawns have faded. Like C through B through E, completely gone. No pawns. That's mate. But it seems like the players are just going to start trading. Knight to f4 played. Nice idea. Leaving the knight hanging. You can't take the knight because after bishop f3, White's king is a little bit too open. But Vaishali takes. And she must have just overthought the situation. Black's position, look, it looks very scary. I completely agree. Knight bd2, this is actually still playable because Black plays knight to d3. But the best move after knight f4 is rook e3. Queen d1 looks really scary, but you can actually just block. Now, don't get me wrong, it looks terrifying, but Vaishali takes the bait, and after bishop f3 and queen d4, she is completely lost. Like, the game flips immediately, and Lagno just plays knight d3, and White just cannot defend all the threats. We have this knight b4, and there's still a fork at the very end. And when the dust settles, Lagno is just totally winning. She's completely winning. Bishop d5, and White resigns because the bishop is going to be traded, the pawn is going to be hunted down, and yes, you could play this out. Like, if you're playing this, you should play this out. But at the candidates level, this is this is just a win for Black, and a very nice one. I mean, she won a very nice game. She played this kind of Marshall concept, and a tough game for Vaishali. She clearly came with some sort of opening idea. It got complicated, and she made one mistake, and sometimes one mistake that's literally it. She's on 2.5 out of 6. Caruana on 3.5, and she's doing very, very well. Leitingjie going into today had 2 points. She has not been having a good tournament. These are the standings after 5 rounds, and Humpy it also has 2 points. So they are actually tied for last, which is kind of nuts because they're both 25-50 GMs. But that's the candidates. I mean, that's just sort of how it goes sometimes. And they both wanted to win this game. And they both showed up, and they went straight for a King's Indian defense. Which, like, if you're going to be playing the King's Indian defense at the candidates, hold on tight, because it's going to be crazy. E5, castles, all of this has been played before. King H1, now Black is going to go for this F5 idea. Both knights get out of the way. Knight D3, F5, F4, striking right back. Now, Humpy, as you can see, with this kind of 10 minutes spent, a little bit less comfortable. We see Lei playing quite confidently, plays H6 to play G5, and Humpy plays C5. Giving up a pawn to try to take the center. Lei opens the position. This is not what we normally see in a King's Indian. What you normally see in a King's Indian something like f3, f4, g5, h5, blah, 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 and then blah, 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 and it's like a pawn race, and it's insane. We're not seeing that. We're seeing a position that actually looks extremely open, right? So both players, all the lines are open. Knight e5. Now we have a trade. de, an imbalance has been created. White has been granted a pass pawn. She pushes it. Black defends. Knight comes into c5. It's a really nasty position, I have to say. Both sides look like they could win at any moment. The knight comes back, and Lei is defending herself with her bishops. All right, White is very solid in the center, very strong pawn. Both players, time is ticking. Humpy down to 4 minutes to make 14 moves, and she plays knight e3, starts trading. We look like we're headed for an easy endgame, but the pawn has fallen. Now, White does get that pawn. Queen f6. Humpy has a minute. Humpy's going to lose the game on time unless she plays every move instantly. Queen f2. They do have bonus time, by the way. It's a different time control. Don't ask me why. I think that's what the players decided. e4, knight f5, and here, Black can just very easily trade and make a draw, but she says no draw. She wants to continue to pose problems. Humpy has 3 moves to make. She makes the 40th move. She gets her extra time. But she's losing. Knight to b5. White needed to play not c4, inviting in the knight. White actually needed to go knight to g3, lose the knight, get this pawn back, lose this, and try to defend this endgame like this, which is like, I mean, it's like impossible to do as a human being. But the point is, you will have time to run your king. That's just the point. You have a 2-on-1, you're going to run your king. The way Humpy did it, she did this, but now Black just runs the pawn. And believe it or not, out of nowhere, Lei Tingtie's pawn is on a2, and it's over. I mean, the game is just over. You just lose. Like, out of nowhere, you play a back and forth game. This is the end game. You know, right? But Humpy just didn't leave enough time on the clock. She just didn't. And the Black Knight strolls around, and that's it. And, like, she grabbed the pawn, and just out of nowhere, it was Lei Tingtie getting her first win of this candidates tournament. Knight a3, c4 coming. White's defenses are just completely falling apart. Also, you can just queen and obviously win the knight. But oh my goodness, I'm allergic to endgames. And Lei Tingtie on the board. She has 3 out of 6. She's back to 50%. Nepo and Fabi. I mean, you talk about a matchup of the big boys. I don't know what their weight is, but first place, Jan Nepomniachtchi tied with Gukesh. Fabiano half a point out. Yesterday, both survived a hurricane. All right, where they were running around naked, like in the middle of a field about to get struck by lightning. Today, we have e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. And as we have seen, we have essayed the Spanish, we have essayed the Italian, we've essayed the Ponziano. No, just kidding. That is not going to be seen at the candidates. There are way too many easy lines there that simply hold everything. And you may be shocked that in this position, Jan Nepomniachtchi basically offered a draw on move 3. Played knight c3. If you want to kill the game in chess, you play knight c3. Like, if Nepo wanted to win this game, he would have went for the Italian, or he would have went for the Spanish, because that's where all the cutting-edge theory is. Jan plays knight c3, knight f6, the 4 knights, completely playable at beginner and intermediate level. At the high level, takes, bishop b4, takes, bishop d3, d5 takes, castles, castles. Black here can just play cd, but Fabi actually had a position of cd on the board versus Hikaru. He had a very similar line, and Hikaru played some weird sideline, and instead of that, Hikaru, in this game, Fabiano plays bishop g4. Not the most popular move, but it puts White under pressure, and you see the engine on a low depth thinks that, you know, there's some sort of advantage. Bishop h5 comes back, and they played a lot of theory. Nepo here thought a little while. There was a check. Queen e5, a rook e1, you cannot take the knight because bishop h7. Knight e7, and then, you know, we trade the queens, and we make a draw. I hadn't even checked in on this game, and the players had already, you know, just traded all the pawns, and this is just a dead draw. And they barely spent any time. They spent less than 20 minutes each. Nepo spent 15 minutes on the game. They didn't want to play. Well, you know, maybe Fabi wanted to play. But the thing is, an easy draw with Black, you take it all the time in the candidates. I think Jan, I don't know. Maybe he didn't expect knight c6. Maybe he didn't expect e5. Maybe he thought, you know, I don't know. But it's like a little bit of a bonus rest day. You get half a point, you keep moving forward. Jan tends to time these draws very well. I mean, like I said, 30 at this point, 14, so he's at like 34 candidates games where he's let her been tied for first. All right? But the rest of the games weren't like that. And actually important, this game, I started recording the recap right before this game actually concluded, believe it or not. I'm going to fill in the couple. I wasn't intending to. Today's recap has been a little bit goofy. And Goryachkina's name is so brawlic, it also cuts off the screen. I mean, I gotta... All right, anyway. Nurgul Salimova, international master from Bulgaria. Goryachkina, Alexandra, grandmaster, 2600. We have a Catalan. We have a main line of a Catalan. We have DC, A6, trying to play B5 to meet White's queen. Oh, and then we have 2 more epic games, just in case. Every recap has been about 30 minutes. You know the drill. Bishop G5. All of this has been played some million times. Rook C1. And White just tries to put nagging pressure on Black in this position. Bishop D5 played by Goryachkina. We have takes, ED, Queen B3. And you just look at this position, you go, wow. I mean, White has got some nice things going on here, which she must capitalize by playing E4. You have to play E4 here, putting pressure on this diagonal. If you don't, play something else, like she did in the game. She played Bishop H3. Suddenly Black is better. What? Like, you get all of this, and then, you know, E4 would have been kind of the next natural approach. She puts the bishop. How can you even blame White for doing this? But suddenly White doesn't have a target. And the plan Nurgul chooses in this game to kind of put the knight on C5, that is not the best plan. Goryachkina puts everything on a light square. And then, this is not supposed to happen. You realize White accomplished, like, nothing. You go back to here, it's the same position. Look at White's pawn structure over the next 10 moves. Nothing happens. White is just unable to make any progress. She had a moment, and now suddenly she's under a massive attack. And these two played in the World Cup final. Goryachkina definitely sensed that she had the upper hand against her opponent. We go into an endgame, and it is Black who is calling the shots here. White has good drawing chances. Nurgul is fighting back. But watch as Goryachkina just plays like a python. I mean, she just suffocates her opponent. She walks the king to the center, puts the knight on H5, and look at this. Look at that. That's mate. Rook takes, king F7. This is a checkmate on the board. Rook G2, and now an absolutely brutal technique. You just push the pawn. White cannot move. You cannot escape this whirlpool. C4, bishop E2, rook D2, and even here, resignation was possible, but the game ended. Rook H6 check, king E7, rook H7, king D6, rook H6. The king walked out of the checks to C5, rook H5, C3, rook F5, C2. It could have ended in a variety of ways. You could have played rook H6, king E7, and put the rook on C6 as well. The pawn still would have went to C3. White has no moves. You can't move the bishop. You cannot move any pawn. You cannot move the king because you lose the bishop. I mean, you literally have 5 pieces which cannot move. This is a brutal game from Goryachkina and a very big win for her. She now has 4 points, which is incredible. And another big winner of the day was a winner in this game. We have a tale of 2 tournaments. We have a tale of Tan Zhongyi taking all the chances that she has been getting and making for herself. Anna Muzychuk, who has missed 3 chances to win a game, which is crazy. And in this game, we had a sideline of a d4. We didn't have like a queen's pawn. We had a Kali system. All right, bishop coming to b2, bishop b7. This is like the chess from like the 1920s. I think Tan Zhongyi just trying to take her opponent out of her comfort zone and just goes for queen g4. Just coming straight for her opponent. Nice idea here, b4. Restricting the queen side. Black strikes back with a5. And now knight f3. And the queen is an attacker, but it's also a defender. Anna castles. She says, you know what? You want to go attack me? Go ahead. Tan Zhongyi says, I will. Let me make a couple of preparatory moves. And now h4. And this is the difference of having 3.5 out of 5 and being in first place, and having 2 out of 5 and being tied for 6th, 7th, and 8th. It's like Tan Zhongyi is just confident. She's flowing like water. Rook a4. She gives the pawn up. She does not care. The rook is arriving and attacking the queen because now the center is locked. And she is just going to pound away on g6. g5 play, 23 minutes spent on that move. and just bishop c3. She's going to ask the rook to move. Another pawn comes to the attack. And fg is an idea, but so is f5, f6, and f5, fe. And within the next few moves, Tan Zhongyi has a dominant attack. She had an even better move here. She could have played f takes g5, but she goes here, and black just doesn't have the sufficient time to defend herself. She's not even losing if you look at the engine, but practically speaking, look at this. How on earth do you deal with all of this? You do your best, but then white sacrifices the bishop, like the Terminator walking into the position, knight c6, and it's still not completely lost. But queen g5 is beautiful, and the bishop from the corner, queen g7, rook g8, takes. What a move. What a move. She sacrifices her queen, because if it's taken, rook f8, and she gets it back because of the discovered attack. So bishop f6 here, and believe it or not, it is still not lost. Believe it or not, this endgame, this game, bishop e6, and Muzychuk is holding. She's holding the game because there is no way to get mated. But she plays rook e4, and that loses because of knight g8, queen f5, and not even queen f5, the absolutely brutal move, queen f7 check, which forces black to trade, and the pawn cannot be stopped. And Tan Zhongyi has 4.5 out of 6. She is playing chess like the freaking Terminator. It is absolutely crazy, like the freaking Terminator. And this game is our last game of the day. Pragg is going to try to put some pressure on his opponent, who is struggling, all right? He is struggling. He is the lowest seeded player, right, at 2630. And I said before that this was probably going to happen. I called this. I also said Abasov is going to have a really tough time once the white games are over. He is now playing with the black pieces, and we are going to see if he can survive or if somebody will maybe overextend against him. So we have d4, d5. We have this. Abasov plays a very solid line, a very reputable, very good line. And this line has been played many, many times. We also saw this in a Gukesh game earlier in the event, I think. Was it Gukesh versus I can't even remember at this point. So many games have been played. But this is... Maybe it was Abasov, actually. Abasov who played like this. But this is a very, very stubborn and a very annoying line. And what Pragg does is he plays c5. And he plays c5 just for this. He just wants imbalance, 2-on-1. It's all you need as a good player. You don't want a position of complete symmetry. b4, knight a4, castles, castles, and now he's going to go to work. And we don't have to wait very long to go to work, because first, Pragg gives up the bishop for the knight. Okay, now we have the knight coming to f5. Pragg is giving up the next bishop. Now Abasov rips open the center of the board. We have takes, takes. The rook is coming, and you see, by the way, Pragg working on that imbalance, right? He's working on A and B. We have d4, very complex game. The bishop goes to g5. The position is about to explode. g4. My man Pragg is like, bro, I gotta beat you. I'm sorry. I'm 115 points higher rated. All right? h6. The queen goes to the center, giving up the bishop to take the knight. Now it's horses versus bishops. Rook a7, giving up the pawn in the center of the board. Pragg is up a pawn, but the pawn comes here. You cannot take it because it's protecting the rook, because then bishop c5. So instead you have to move the knight. Now I take the pawn near your king with a check. Oh my god, now I bring the queen. Now we trade the queens. Now it's knights versus bishops and 4 pawns each. Bishop b8, a mistake. It was better to keep the bishop around here and be active. Now Pragg is pushing the pace, but Pragg has 13 minutes to make 9 moves. Rook c7, and actually here after bishop f4, it would have been better for Pragg to go rook h1. But he goes here, and here the advantage is still hanging very much in the balance. It's super complicated. The pawns are having a staring contest. Pragg doesn't want to take, because if he takes, he brings the king and this pawn into the game. Abasov doesn't want to take because he doesn't want to open up his king. And now Abasov plays this ridiculous move, g5. It's actually the best move. By the engine, it's evaluated as a very decent move, and suddenly Pragg has no advantage anymore. In this position, what it was even better for Abasov to play king h7 and come here. It's very complicated, however. When I say no advantage, it's because the engine, the eval bar says it's back to equal. But in reality, again, practically speaking, these pawns are much more ready to run than these guys. And so Pragg trades the rooks, and he plays rook a8. And in this position, Abasov has to avoid take. This pawn is meaningless. What's meaningful in this position is to get here, so that if white starts pushing, g3 is well timed. The knight would come back, the rook would stop the pawns, and in this position, black is in time to create counterplay. So Abasov has to decide, does he eat or does he come down to the second rank? And he chooses the wrong way. And this is how Abasov is going to lose. He's just going to lose late in the game, critical decisions. He's an incredible player, but these guys are 2750 for a reason. Rook a6 and Abasov. This is, by the way, a brilliant move by Pragg. Knight d7, disallowing any access to f6, protecting the b8 square for the promotion. And now the rooks get stuck in a staring contest. This rook is trapped, and Pragg plays a4, and that's it. He's going to take and advance. He completely ignores everything Abasov is doing, and he plays pawn to a6. And if the bishop comes down, the knight will come back, seal the door shut, and Pragg wins. What a big game. Gukesh ties for first. Vidit and Pragg with massive wins for India. And these are your overall standings. The women's side is still a two-horse race, I would say. We have Goryachkina and we have Tandrongi, but Lagno right there, so it's really close. The men's candidates is a six-horse race. 6 guys are separated by 1 point. Anything can happen. But Abasov was always destined to have a tough tournament. Alireza on 1.5 is a complete shock. Alireza could go absolutely ballistic now and just play every game for a win, but I have no idea if it's going to... I mean, that is a shocking turn of events. I will see you all for round number 7. Get out of here.